Hello and welcome to our special feature, The Future of Indian Real Estate, Setbacks and Comebacks, for NAMMA Permanent Address, a joint initiative by the Times of India and CREDAI Bengaluru, partnered by Times Now. Now, the domestic real estate landscape has of course experienced its fair share of boom and bust cycles. But now, with property values at an all-time low, is the appetite for home ownership perhaps at an all-time high? To tackle the topic, we're joined by a highly distinguished panel of subject matter experts from CREDAI. Please allow me to introduce them. We have with us the co-founder and past president of CREDAI National and the chairman and managing director of Sterling Developers, Mr. Ramani Sastri. The secretary of CREDAI Bengaluru and the chairman and managing director of Ferns Estates and Developers, Mr. Errol Fernandes. The president-elect CREDAI Bengaluru and the joint managing director of Habitat Ventures, Mr. Bhaskar T Nagendrappa. Mr. Sastri, I'd love to kick off the conversation with you.
Certainly.
Now, when we look at the scenario we find ourselves in now, this global health crisis, companies have transitioned to a work-from-home model at a pace that's unprecedented, at a rate that's unprecedented, at a scale that's unprecedented. What impact has this had on the transition and the interest really in home ownership in Bengaluru and Pan-India?
Well, a lot has changed between March of 2020 and Jan of 2021. We do see a slight change in the mood and perception of many people. A lot of buyers who were sitting on the fence in the late 2019 and early 2020 have now made up their mind to go and pick up a home of their own choice. It so happened that when the pandemic struck us, not many people were aware of what it's going to look like and what it's going to be. So for a moment, everyone said we should start working from home. Government of India tried to do its best, enabling bandwidth and stuff like that wherever that was possible. So India didn't have a setback in terms of people keeping to work with the global peers, and they had to continue to work because a lot of the IT related services had to deliver many things overseas. So that was possible that they could work from home. But that was because the enabling of the bandwidth and stuff like that.
And Mr. Fernandes, I'd love to bring you in here, building on some of the points that Mr. Sastri has, I think, so beautifully put, right? If we look at the domestic real estate market, it has experienced a surge in demand over the last 2 decades. And I think that is largely driven by rapid urbanization on the one hand, rising household incomes on the other. Do you believe that is a trend that will continue? Or in light of the current scenario, have we reached a saturation point?
Actually, there are two things to be considered here. One is, if you look at India's per capita income, it's about $2,000 per annum.
Roughly.
Yeah. And if you look at Brazil, they're at 13,000. So even to get to Brazil, we need to go up by about 6 times. And the metros are growing rapidly and will continue to grow. That's one part of it. The other part is that we've just come out of the bottom of the cycle, and we are heading and have now turned around. And so I think that is also going to accelerate demand. Though, of course, a lot of this demand is now moving towards the suburbs and even to the Tier 2 cities.
And Mr. Nagendrappa, in this environment, how do reputed builders continue to retain their relevance in the heart and the mind of the consumer?
Today, relevant builders, that is, today we are finding majority of them, and people also have acknowledged the credible developers are amongst the CREDAI developers. And today, whatever we have delivered, and we are delivering, even in this period of pandemic and all of that, the so-called, all of us, we had a routine meeting, periodical meeting, even with the home buyers, the kind of relationship what we share and the kind of comfort what they get. And always, there are different stages of construction. Within this construction, the adaptability for change and adaptability for the current scenario, the requirements, all of those things were, taken care. And by and large, even if you see across the survey, even I read it, even in Times also, among the top 10 developers in, India, the 6 were from Bangalore city. So that shows actually how concerned or how well or how friendly we are to the the home buyers or the end customers.
Touching on what Sir just mentioned here, All right. He talked about customer requirements, Mr. Sastri. And, customers now care more about their physical well-being, their mental well-being, and perhaps their psychological well-being, more so than ever before. But what does that translate to in terms of tangible terms for developers?
Well, I think from where Nagendrappa mentioned, in the first place, let me put this perspective on the table that yes, the top 5, top 7 developers by listed entities are in Bangalore. I wouldn't undermine the effort of the other developers from different parts of the country. Let's understand that real estate development between Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Pune, Chennai, Hyderabad, it's all transforming, and I think it has changed in the last 50 years. The rapid change has happened in the last 20 years. And I think we all as a community learn from each other, because what is invented somewhere is not we don't need to go back to the drawing board and reinvent something like that. What we all realize today, the customer's satisfaction is very important. So we try and build around a community. Sometimes it's a child-centric community because we believe that the younger parentage is looking for something for their children, because both husband and wife are working. Right. So what we tend to do is, though some people take that stand and some people don't take that positioning in the product, the creativity these days is around a community where open spaces, parks, playgrounds, entertainment zones, all this have become a part of any development beyond a size of 5 to 6 acres. See, in the earlier past, people were happy if you gave them a gym and you gave them a swimming pool. Today, people are looking for something beyond. They would want some space which could be a party space, because people have started mingling, or the youngsters want to meet their friends or have a birthday party with their friends. They are not looking to go out somewhere. If they have a facility, they are happy with that. Likewise, the changes that we have seen between a number of what we call as amenities, which basically necessities, they are no longer considered amenities. If you've got a playground, if you've got a gym, if you've got a pool, if you've got any kind of community hall and all that, these are now bare necessities for community living. What has happened is, people have changed, the thought process has changed. We are adapting a lot more to the Western world than we were 20 years ago. Even the products itself, the sizing of the products, the finishing of the products, I think we are close to, I would actually say we are close to international global standards. But rider, I wouldn't paint everybody with the same brush. When there are, it happens in every trade, every industry. You have good people, you have excellent people, you have bad and poor people too.
Sure, fair enough.
It happens for the real estate people, it happens for the customers. So I don't think anybody in any which way can be blamed. I believe that every customer comes from a perspective that he doesn't want to be deprived of what he was ever deprived of. Right. So he wants to buy the future for his child today when he is buying an apartment. So are we giving them future-ready apartments is the question.
Well, let's build on that point, and I think it largely focuses on affordability in many ways and shapes. So that said, Mr. Fernandes, how do developers in this market ensure that they have properties on offer for every pocket size?
Actually, it depends really on the developer's perspective. Like, for example, I might do projects which is more towards the middle income group. Ramani might do projects more towards the higher income group. And by and large, you never have projects which will, a single project which meets everybody's requirement. Very true. Right? So depending on their budgets, depending on their location, depending on what kind of amenities they seek. So you'll have to go across projects. It's really not possible to have everything in one project.
So this diversification that we're sometimes seeing in terms of builders honing in on different specialities, do you think this is a short-term trend? Is this a fad that will phase out?
Actually, it's all a question of demand and supply. If you see a few years ago, there was nothing known as the budget housing. That was done by the government. Right. But that has changed now in the last 5 to 10 years. In fact, that's proving that size of the pie is now growing. And we have more and more developers who are looking at volumes rather than at margins, which you have at the higher end of the segment. And also with people having traveled abroad, higher income groups, so the benchmark of what is affordable is now rising, right? So, yep. And they have also become very discerning, having traveled abroad, worked in the IT industry. So for them, what was supposedly quality before is today a way of life.
Mr. Nagendrappa, let's bring reform and regulation into the conversation here. And we've seen a lot of that, a lot of policy changes on behalf of the government, both at a state level and a federal level. Which of these policies do you think have been most effective, and to what extent have they influenced the consumer mindset?
Today, actually, RERA has played a major role. RERA is one of the major policy changer or regulatory which has come in, which has probably enhanced the sentiments or the belief system in the entire the way the entire real estate module is to work. There's more trust or more belief on deliveries. I mean, I'm not talking about the past. I mean, at least in the future, the current and the future projects, they are rest assured that on the delivery side, it is taken care to a larger extent. And as far as the policies are concerned, actually, policies do matter to an extent. But unfortunately, like, now the reduction interest rate, okay, that kind of it was a sentiment booster. There was a sudden, boost in sales and things like that. And even the stamp duty reduction, what happened in Maharashtra or elsewhere, which kind of, pumped in the sales.
Right.
And unfortunately, which we were deprived of. I mean, in Karnataka, despite our, effort to do that.
And as you just mentioned reduction in interest rates. But I pose my next question to you, Mr. Sastri, which is also that these loan products are now becoming increasingly consumer friendly. So to what extent can technology act as a catalyst here?
Let me tell you that, the couple of things that the government of India really needs to do, but for various reasons, I think they have their own constraints. So they're not really able to come out with a big bang, bold reform. Land has always been a state subject. So the center can act in one direction, the state can act in another direction. We are probably the most regulated industry in the world today. Right. I don't think in a country where everything is deregulated, right, we are the ones who are still regulated. We have some 30 odd permissions to get from the city before we go to an environment and we go to RERA and stuff like that. While all this has actually done away or weeded the fly-by-night. It has weeded the fly-by-night operators. A lot of people have shut shop. And only those who are serious in the profession will continue to dig their heels and play this particular business. But I must say here that many changes that the government of India has tried to do over the last, I would say 15, 20 years, from repealing urban land ceiling and stuff like that, the overall industry trade has grown. There is no dispute on the fact that this has grown, and we are becoming one of the largest employment generators in the country today.
Well, Mr. Fernandes, switching gears for a moment, consumer preferences are changing. And Mr. Sastri mentioned a few moments ago that folks are looking for homes that are future ready. And for many, that means eco-friendly. So to what extent has green living permeated your project portfolios and your future rollout plans as a developer?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our design is now centered around being eco-sensitive. Right from, for example, water. The wastewater that is out of the building is recycled, is treated, recycled, and then again used for the gardening of your plants and stuff like that. And also the power that we get, wherever it's possible and feasible, developers are installing rooftop solar plants. And also in terms of technology, you have IoT today, Internet of Things. Right? So even if you're not at home, whether you're any part of the globe, you can still see what's happening at home, control things at home if you're not there. Safety and security issues, so on and so forth, yes.
And Mr. Nagendrappa, in the current environment, how do developers go about land acquisition strategies? How do they go about evaluating and identifying the most promising prospective areas, communities, localities for development?
See, this is primarily, the influencing factor is the end user. And whether it is commercial, residential, or office or hospital, whatever we talk about, because ultimately it is driven by demand. I mean, wherever there is a demand, we go in hunt of, to supply. So the entire thing boils down to the demand supply kind of a scenario, where in which we, depending on the demand for a specific, land use or specific kind of a project. So we go in search, and accordingly, the home buyer sentiment or the office space also today in Bangalore, given the traffic scenario, I mean, I'm talking about COVID is there now for past 1 year, whatever we have gone through. But prior to this also, now actually the people look at their convenience in the form of work, live and shop or entertain or office or whatever the requirement. It's basically convenience. Avoid the commute as much as possible, or look out for the projects which are very close to the infrastructure in the form of transportation.
Let me add to what Nagendrappa said. It's a very tricky thing, because in India, infrastructure comes after population.
It does.
World over, infrastructure is laid out earlier, the population comes there later. I mean, a lot of people always speak and say, no, we should have satellite towns, we should take people away from the city center and move them outside. While we don't expect the government to invest in it, the government should look at being an enabler, allow us to develop the infrastructure, because without schools, without hospitals, without entertainment, without workspaces, it's unfair to say, okay, just because you can't afford to be in the city, you go out.
Well, Mr. Fernandes, Bengaluru has come up in the conversation on more than one occasion, and it's a market that seems to have weathered the storm better than most. Given your affiliation with CREDAI, give us a sense of the current developer sentiment in this city and how well aligned it is with consumer sentiment.
First of all, a lot of the inventory buildup that was there is now been rapidly diminishing. So with that, the number of launches have increased, and on one side, and on the other, the consumers are also looking forward for new offerings. Though they were initially very keen on taking on apartments which were nearing completion or completed, but now they prefer to also buy apartments in my projects that have just started, so that they get a more elongated period of time to pay up for it. Sure. They get a wider choice, and also they're not constricted with things like location and stuff like that. So in that sense, consumer sentiment has aligned with what we have been trying to do.
And Mr. Nagendrappa, if we were to ask you to look at competitors or other companies or communities or countries perhaps that have excelled with respect to providing scalable, sustainable living options, superior living spaces, who would you name?
Actually, Southeast Asian countries actually predominantly look at the Nordic countries. So the kind of but today, I mean, any project, whatever we are doing, we are looking at sustainable kind of buildings and LEED rated, and even the end user also is looking at which is environment friendly home also. Apart from the other parameters of convenience, whether it is budget, location, and the configuration of the units and affordability and all of that. So by and large, actually now the younger generation, the aspirations is totally high, like as Mr. Sastri was saying, that I mean now people are globally exposed or experienced, and because of the internet or they are exposed to, their expectations is higher. Okay, so they always look at an international kind of an experience, living experience, and that they have been seeing. I mean, basically coming from Bangalore city and how it used to live, I mean, probably a few years back. Today, I mean, apartment culture, Bangalore was to be called as a pensioner's paradise, or, a retirement, city, I mean, early to now. I mean, it's more young and vibrant and cosmopolitan in nature, and probably you have the best of the best, or all kinds of foods available in Bangalore city. I mean, the expectation is gone up in all the areas of living.
And Mr. Sastri, what best practices can we perhaps adopt and embrace from our counterparts abroad to satisfy the local homegrown prospective buyer?
I would say that I don't think we need to adapt anything further than what we've already. See, in terms of consumer products and stuff like that, I think we are 100% on par with any part of the world. Let's get this, that some parts of the world where wooden structures are possible, and where the metal structures are possible, where it's only a ground and one upper story, which is not going to be adaptable in this country. But in terms of finishes, I think we are best with anybody anywhere in the world.
Well, Mr. Fernandes, for a prospective home buyer that may be on the fence, contemplating home ownership but not quite ready to pull the trigger, what would your words of advice be to him or her?
It's not going to be, I mean, this is the best time that one can choose to buy a house because interest rates are at its lowest and you have a wide variety of offerings on the table just now. And if you wait, on one side, you're going to still be paying your rent. On the other, the prices are only going to go up and not come down. So if you don't buy now, it's going to be more expensive later.
And Mr. Nagendrappa, do you echo the same sentiments? What's your view if someone were to approach you for guidance in the current market?
Yeah, I've been telling the same thing. I mean, at the end of the night, there has to be a day. I mean, light in sense. So because, I mean, we have seen enough of, stagnated market. I mean, now at least, I mean, there has to be a good thing. And today, because of the interest rate factor, I mean, the sentiments also have increased. I mean, people's aspiration, because they have suddenly seen, as, I mean, both the panelists said, that, I mean, home is not anymore a home. Home has behaved like office, home has behaved like schools, home has behaved like hospital, restaurant, I mean, you name it. So, I mean, now the people, the end user or the customer also has, acknowledged the importance of home.
I'll have to thank all three of you gentlemen for sharing such a rich range of perspectives with us. It's been very informative and knowledgeable. And by way of closing comments, Mr. Sastri, I believe you had a statement to make, so I'd like to...
Simple statement. Work from home is not here to stay. People will have to sooner than later get back to work. And when you get back to work, you come back to normal routine life. You need spaces, you need livable spaces, you need habitable spaces, and you need working spaces. That's what it is.
Mr. Fernandes, last words.
I differ slightly from Ramani. I think work from home is here to stay in a hybrid manner. People will need to go to the office, of course, but working from home, in most cases, will still continue to be there at least twice, thrice a week. And not just work from home. I think work from anywhere would be the new modern mantra.
Mr. Nagendrappa, your final thoughts.
Urbanization is at the highest level. Bangalore is, totally considered as one of the IT hubs or evolving IT hub, probably overtaking other larger, cities. And this is the time, and market is going to be here. Real estate, historically, if you see from ages, from centuries, it is there, and it will be there, and we'll be, rocking in the coming days.
I'm going to add,
yes.
This is the only business where we take a depreciating rupee and give you an appreciating asset. That's real estate.
Well, on that note, that brings our special feature, Future of Indian Real Estate, Setbacks and Comebacks, to a close. I'd like to thank all of our panelists once more for joining us. Thanks for watching.